Check, check.
Test. Shana Tova. Shana Tova. Test. Shana Tova.
So you echo everything. Well, we echo whole lines and she sings, and then the second and third times, short phrases.
Yeah. Well, we do our parts, and then the third time we do exactly what she's doing. She'll just float it out.
Oh, okay.
So first time, whole line, second time our parts, third time just copy. No, it's always nice. It's just too bad that
get the free version of these games.
You want me to ask? I'm just training video, so it'll be. I can go something.
You end up being like, that's a word, and then you try it. That's not a word.
As long as the light is good, I don't need my reading glasses, which is good because I forgot them again. I've been bringing them to rehearsal.
It's got to start with a T. Alphabetically. Yeah, it's T. Like, it's really tense. I know.
One piece of advice. Whatever key I start the song in, it's the key you sing it in. No questions asked.
I'm fine with that. It's good.
Whatever key I start it in, is the key you sing it in. Got me?
John, there have been changes. I found that it's big time when it comes to songs.
But, like, once I got stuck on this one chord,
And they all tend to be
I mean, like, a minute. And every, like, day I come back to it for 20 minutes, give up, and then suddenly I move through, like, 10 minutes. Yeah. Well, a lot of times you'll see the best yourself and be like, H-O, and like, W-O-H, what is that? That's not whoa. Oh, it's who? Duh. I have a few money songs that are good for my concert. So today
Part of my five.
December 3rd, I'll be at middle school in West Orange. It's actually pretty different. Different songs.
There are covered
One is Hanukkah, one is Hanukkah
few
song.
groups that came on after the
That's right. And then
Def
Official
Leppard.
Love.
Def Leppard.
But I was teaching this.
Welcome, everyone. We're so happy that you're here with us tonight. My name is Michelle W. Malkin. I'm the Executive Director here at Temple Ner Tamid. Just have a few short announcements before we begin our service. First, please check your cell phones. We've had a great record so far of not having any cell phones go off during our services, so we'd love to keep that going. If you need any help with hearing assistance devices, you can see myself or other ushers that are happy to help you with those. For those who are new to our community, our restrooms are located down this hall across from the kitchen. We also have 2 all-gender accessible restrooms located in our office, which is that way, and one in our basement, or downstairs, for you as well. We have 3 wonderful custodians here with us. Gwen, Glenn, and Danny. They have name tags on. They'll be around if you need anything at all, especially if you have donations for the food drive. They are happy to help you. In the unlikely event of an emergency, behind me are 3 emergency exit doors, as well as 2 here on the sides and 1 down that hallway. In the case of an emergency, we would just make our way down the parking lot onto the Montclair Golf Course, and of course our ushers would help in that situation. We have a first aid kit, CPR kit, and defibrillator located in our office, and the most important thing is just to stay calm and help each other. I want to thank very much Carrie Shavat, our head usher for this evening, who's really helped a lot with getting everything together, and Eric Berlin, our head of security. We really cannot do this without them, so thank you. If you need anything, let us all know. Thank you so much for your time, and our service will begin momentarily.
Gmar Chatima Tova. Yom Kippur is a holiday that spans a number of different themes and a number of different feels. One of the profound truths about Yom Kippur is that although when we fast, the point of fasting is to feel like the creatures that we are, to understand that we are but flesh and blood, we are but dust of the earth. There's a certain joy that we get at the same time from fasting. Because according to our tradition, we feel on today like angels. The act of fasting makes us feel pure. It's the reason that we dress in white. It's the reason that we elicit such light from inside ourselves that it's as if we are ourselves glowing. We are daylight, and thus we can wear a talit. And so for that very reason, as maybe we turn off the, okay, good. For that very reason, I want to invite you to feel whatever you feel today. If you want to feel and tap into that sense of creatureliness, that sense that you are but flesh and blood and you are mortal, own that feeling as well. We sit here tonight, and that's the funny thing about Yom Kippur, many of us so stuffed we can't imagine what it feels like to be hungry. And then over the course of the 25 hours that are Yom Kippur, we slowly fade into that feeling. And then, if you choose to feel the opposite, I want to invite you to do that as well. Yom Kippur, and I've mentioned this last year, is considered by our ancient rabbis 2,000 years ago to be an incredibly joyous holiday. So joyous, in fact, that it was the date that God set, and this is why we celebrate it on this day, to forgive the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf. And for that very reason, in addition to tapping in to the hard parts of Yom Kippur, to our frailty, to our creatureliness, we also have to understand those heights as well. And so on this day, the holiest day in the Jewish year, I want to invite you to define what holiness means to you. If holiness means digging deeper into the hard, do that. And if holiness means climbing into the heights, do that. And allow yourself today to feel whatever comes up for you in the same way that it should when you greet another person and you ask them for the forgiveness that you should be asking all of your neighbors and your friends. When you do that to God, feel the joy of forgiveness or the hardness of the ask. And so we're going to sing together the song Bakshu Fanai, which means seek my face. This is the holiday for seeking God's face, for looking for God wherever God is. And so we begin our service tonight by thinking of that very theme. And the words are easy enough, you almost don't need them in front of you.
Bakshu fanai, seek my face.
Bakshu fanai, seek my face.
El panecha Adonai avakesh.
El panecha Adonai avakesh.
Bakshu fanai, seek my face.
Bakshu fanai, seek my face.
As I seek Shekhinah in this place.
As I seek Shekhinah in this place.
Lecha amar libi, to you does my heart speak.
Lecha libi,
To you does my heart speak. To you does my heart cry. To you does my heart. To you does my heart sing. Sing hallelujah. 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 Here we go again. Bakshu fanai, seek my
Everyone
face.
together.
Your turn. Bakshu fanai, seek my face. Et panecha Adonai avakesh. Et panecha. Et panecha Adonai avakesh. Bakshu fanai, seek my face.
Bakshu fanai, seek my face.
As I seek Shekhinah in this place, as I seek Shekhinah in this place, Lecha amar libi, to you does my heart speak. Lecha amar libi. does my heart speak. To you does my heart cry. To you does my heart sing hallelujah. 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 Now just be my echo. Hallelujah.
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 Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
We formally usher in Yom Kippur as we light tonight's candles. And so I want to call up Leora Perlman as together we turn to page number 9.
Yes?
Mhm.
Please pray responsively. The human spirit is the lamp of God, searching out what lies within us. Shine your light upon us as we strive to serve you. May we find safety in your faithful love.
We're on page 14. Yom Kippur, the Jewish people's festival of the soul, and Kol Nidre, its sacred portal, a night of deep emotions, a night, as the psalmist wrote, to quote, rejoice with trembling. Together? We tremble at the melody, music of spiritual amazement. It fills us with awe as we stand before God and Torah.
We rejoice that we stand together, strengthened by community in this hour of shared weakness and humility.
We tremble, for tonight we confess our flaws, admit our imperfection, and acknowledge a power far beyond our understanding. We tremble, for we find that our ideals are far greater than our ability. Our promises surpass our might.
We rejoice in the freedom that is Kol Nidre's true gift, the freedom to begin a new year without fear of failure, to aspire to be God's image in the world.
We tremble because we are mortal. We rejoice in our gratitude for life.
We rejoice with trembling and enter Kol Nidre to face our humanity.
If you're able, I'll invite you to rise as we turn together to page 16. Sing us with us. Zarua Latzad Ulishre lev Ulishre lev Simcha Simcha Ya 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 of light, for with you is the source of life, for with you is the source of life, in your light we see light, for with you is the source of life, for with you is the source of life, for with you is the source of life, in your light we see light. One more time. Oh, Latzadik Ulishre lev בשירה של מעלה ובשירה של מטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים. In a moment, we're going to hear the ancient words of Kol Nidre, so important to our ancestors that it wasn't in Hebrew, but in the language that most people understood, the legal language at the time, which was Aramaic. Now, the words that Cantor Greenberg just chanted are really important and profound, especially in this day and age, at this time, because she declared that the Avaryanim, those outcasts, those people in ancient days who were ostracized from the community, who may not have been allowed to come, that they specifically are invited to come back for this prayer. It's a reminder to us all that every single one of us makes promises, makes vows, makes oaths that we can't keep. And every one of us needs the ability to be forgiven for those things that we have striven and that we have fell short. And so, whether you see yourself as the angels that you are, or as the outcasts that are invited tonight, I want to invite you to know that you have every right to make the repentance that you seek and to find the forgiveness that is due to you. Kol Nidre, page 18.
join us as one kihila as we sing these words together.
Let our speech be pure and our promises sincere. Let our spoken words, every vow and every oath, be honest and well-intentioned. Let our words cause no pain, bring no harm, and never lead to shame, distrust, or fear. And if, after honest effort, we are able to fulfill a promise, a vow, or an oath, may we be released from its obligation and forgiven for our failure. Let our speech be pure and our promises sincere. Page 20. as we're waiting for the Torahs to be returned, I want to invite anyone who's going to be headed into the chapel area for our Biachad service to head over there. It's beginning now, and we can be seated. And so before we continue, I want to invite up the president of our congregation, Ken Cohen, to deliver a few words of welcome and some announcements.
First, as has become our custom and a communal mitzvah, I ask that you all bring back tomorrow morning bags filled with food. Despite being one of the richest states in the nation, hunger is pervasive in New Jersey. And a notice went out asking that you bring back a bag filled with food. If you can, please bring back 2 bags filled with food so that we can give one to the Human Needs Food Pantry and one to the Community Food Bank of New Jersey. And if you do that, while your stomach may feel pain tomorrow, your soul will be filled with satisfaction. When Ed Koch was nearing the end of his term as mayor of New York City, he was asked by a reporter, "What is your biggest regret?" And in classic Koch fashion, he said, "My biggest failure is that I haven't let voters know how many great things we've actually accomplished during my administration." That is so Ed Koch, and maybe a bit arrogant, but it really is important to share successes. And as part of the shared enterprise that is Temple Ner Tamid, in which we both give and get, we ask a lot from our members. And I believe it is important to let people know what results from their contributions of time, talent, and treasure. At each of the last 2 congregational meetings, I've done a review of the past year and a look ahead to the next. But in thinking about it, I realized that 80, maybe 100 people hear that. On Kol Nidre, we have a gathering of almost 700 people, so why not use this time to share what we have accomplished together? Now, some might think this is a time for introspection and atonement, not celebration. But as Rabbi Katz said tonight, and as he said in one of his first sermons last year at Temple Ner Tamid, Yom not be. Evaluating the past year can include both seeing where we fell short and also where we hit the mark, to build on those things and move ahead more powerfully and effectively. And personally, I've always been troubled by so much of the Yom Kippur liturgy that we are but dust, tiny specks, meaningless in the presence of the Almighty. I've thought that many of us spend too much time and too much money on therapy to learn that we actually are worthy and significant. So we can own our misdeeds and sincerely apologize to those we've hurt. We can, with graciousness, accept the apologies that come our way. And we can also own and take credit for the goals we have met and for all the effort we've put in, even when we haven't exactly hit the target. For me, and I hope for you as well, this past year has been fueled by a sense of renewed energy and purpose. The first thing to acknowledge, then, about this past year, or any year for that matter, is us. I am so deeply appreciative of every single person who contributes in any way to Temple Ner Tamid. And after the high holidays, I plan on sharing in an Igeret the names of everyone who has contributed their time to our community. And as a start to this process of publicly acknowledging people, I want to thank Marge Grayson for giving me this idea. So, how do we evaluate a year at Temple Ner Tamid? Unlike a company that measures its year by whether it turns a profit, a synagogue, like any not-for-profit, should measure itself by whether it delivered on its mission. Were we who we say we are? Our mission is to inspire our members to make our community more curious, connected, and just. Curiosity is the strong desire to know or learn something. And this past year, we challenged each other to learn and be open to new ideas through the newly created SEDEC Leadership Speaker Series, which featured former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, and New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. The series was conceived, driven, and executed by Carrie Shavat and supported by a gift from Shirley Colbert. We'll continue the series this year with more speakers who are shaping debate and affecting important policy. While Talmud study is not unusual for a synagogue, the program this year was brought to life by the group study using YouTube, a good example of what Rabbi Katz laid out for us last year as a goal for TNT, taking what's old and making it new, taking what's new and making it sacred. And in response to the desire stated by many members, we breathed life into the Israel Committee, which started a series of programs on topics from religious pluralism to the Israeli election results, and included panelists from the New York Times and The Forward. This effort was coordinated and led by Fred Pressman and Gary Redoran. Connected. I see that as being linked one to another such that we move together toward common goals, holding each other up along the way and leaving none behind. We connected with each other this year, meeting with friends at Bob's Cafe for Sunday morning brunch, good conversation, and good music. Perry Smilo led and guided the organizing committee, and then Jody Redoran took the reins and led a dedicated crew of volunteers to make it a success. We created a support group for members dealing with issues of aging parents, and our temple nurse, Karen Frank, led this group in sharing the challenges, strategies, and all the emotions that go with it. We started a career bank, a professional networking opportunity with members who have achieved success in a variety of fields, offering their time as mentors to other members considering job or career changes and to students exploring career options. Dan Shapiro and Jeff Plout each had the idea independently and then worked together to make it happen. We made our community more just and whole by collecting and distributing food to our neighbors in need, over 4,000 bags of groceries during the course of the past year, preparing meals for people to eat with dignity, 500 meals, providing housing for those temporarily displaced, and advocating in Trenton and elsewhere for immigrant and refugee justice, thereby increasing the reach and impact of our social justice work. Trish Perlmutter, Fred Pressman, Emily DeFore, Sharon Mandel, Dana Hudon, Debbie Kravitz, and Lori Price Abrams led the charge on these initiatives and worked with many of you who regularly show up to do this sacred work. We celebrated 10 years of Cantor Greenberg being our spiritual leader at Temple Ner Tamid. And hopefully in 9 years we'll have a similar celebration for Rabbi Katz. And we added to our professional staff by hiring Michelle Malkin as our executive director. In just 4 months, she has transformed the way we track, communicate, and interact with members. She's overseen several building improvements to facilitate our growing need for space, and is working with our staff to bring a cohesive vision for how TNT can best serve its members. On Rosh Hashanah, I spoke about the new sound system and live streaming capability we installed to make Ner Tamid accessible to anyone who wants to be part of it. David Amlin spearheaded the project for the temple with his expertise in sound technology. Our Shoresh preschool program, led by Wendy Blum, went from 70+ children to over 90. And we had 38 new members join Temple Ner Tamid this year. With this growth, we are serving and engaging more and more people in our mission. And for the first time, an LGBTQ flag with a Jewish star stood in front of the synagogue. We had a table at Bloomfield Pride and had LGBTQ-themed Torah study. We did this to celebrate that we are all richer for all the people in our lives and in the TNT community, and for the beautiful tapestry created by embracing diversity in all its forms. Curious, connected, and just. Those three words yielded a lot of good stuff. So what next? This coming year, we'll build on the success we've had by continuing the speaker series and focusing on advocacy and tikkun olam. A new website with a modern look and a user-friendly experience is on the way, as is a new logo for TNT that better represents who we are now. Marty Baum and Moses Oliva are leading that work. We'll continue with our adult education and add to it with Cantor Greenberg's Musar groups, meditation and yoga, Melton class, and lunch with the rabbi. And we will begin to better serve a cohort previously underserved, those with infants and toddlers not already participating in any of our other programs, by adding services on Saturday morning and exploring other opportunities for engaging those families. And I am particularly excited to announce that over this coming year, under the guidance of Ira Schwartz, our religious school director, and lay leaders Larry Rosenthal and Nancy Friedman Zinn, we will reimagine our religious school for 21st century learners. And to get that started, just this week, we received a seed grant from the Ethel and Harry Rexon Family Foundation, which will enable us to hire a consultant with expertise in the trends in Jewish education to lead us through that process. And for the first time in 20 years, we'll have a congregational trip to Israel, which will happen in August. An informational session to launch that trip will be on October 20th, so please mark your calendars. Some of what we've accomplished is what we've been talking about for several years, and I've come to understand that we have to balance patience with impatience. It's a journey, and it can be frustrating playing the long game. But together, we are creating the conditions in which change can happen as we move along the process of reimagining what synagogue can be in 2020. So, why recap the past year and preview the coming year? Sure, I'm proud that we are a synagogue here for the challenges, the needs, and wants of a contemporary suburban Jewish community. I'm happy that we are working on meeting the needs of all of our diverse membership, and I'm excited that we are growing. But this isn't just about us. The stronger we are, the more we are able to make a difference in the lives of those around us. We are at a critical time, with so many institutions and norms being challenged and even shattered. It is critical that we, as a synagogue, remain vital to meet the challenges of the day. Several legislators around the country have recently said that the faith-based community has been the primary driver behind laws enacted in their states to improve access to the voting booth, health care for many who might fall through the cracks, equal treatment across the gender spectrum, and humane and moral treatment of immigrants and refugees. This is what we are called on to do as Reformed Jews, and we need to be well-positioned to answer that call, to say, Hineni. I am so privileged to be part of this community, and I ask each of you to be part of this journey in any way that works for you. To paraphrase Rabbi Tarfon, we may not finish the work of perfecting the world, but we have got to do our part in getting there. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we all have a happy, healthy, and fulfilling year.
And we transition into the Mariv section of our service, and we turn to page 22 as we rise for the Baruch. We're seated together. We turn to page 25.
Day and night are yours, creative spirit of the universe. The muted colors of twilight, the radiance of dawn, you are the spreading wings of light, the deepening shadows of darkness and ever-changing drama. In the human heart, too, the struggle between darkness and light unfolds. From sunlit heights of generosity, the human heart sinks to the gloomy depths of selfishness. Although we fall, you give us the strength to rise again. You call on those who hurt through word or deed to break from the wrongdoing and return to you. All who hear your call to goodness are embraced. All who reject emptiness and evil find acceptance from you. We come into your presence this night of Kol Nidre, aware that our shortcomings and weaknesses are many, yet encouraged by your promise of forgiveness, we choose freely the path of repentance, restoring wholeness to our lives and holiness to the world.
Page 26.
We continue together. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otan v'limadeta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu Shobeinu v'kumenu Nasiach b'chukecha V'nizmor b'divrei Toratcha u'b'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu v'hem nekei yomam v'alayla yomam v'alayla.
Together. Love beyond all space and time. Your love enfolds your people, Yisrael. We receive it in your teaching, your gift of Torah, sacred obligations, discipline, and law. So let us speak these teachings when we lie down and rise up and find joy forever in your Torah and mitzvot. They are the very essence of our life, ours to ponder and study all our days. May we never lose or be unworthy of your love.
In a moment, we're going to turn to page 28. And this holiday, Yom Kippur, is the only holiday during the year where the second line after the Shema, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut Le'olam Va'ed, is said aloud. Now, there's an ancient teaching about why that is. And as the story goes, Moses one day, when he was getting the Torah from God on top of Sinai, heard the angels in their own way blessing God with their own words. And the angels chose to bless God with the words, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut Le'olam Va'ed, blessed are you, God, forever and ever. And Moses so loved that line that Moses took that line and taught it to the people and said, when you bless God, when you praise God, use that line. But our rabbis 2,000 years ago likened what Moses did to somebody who found a precious jewel. And loving that jewel so much, he knew that because he had found it and it belonged to someone else, he must hide it away, from time to time taking it out, looking at it very quietly and secretly, and putting it back. But on Yom Kippur, say our rabbis, when there is no difference between us and angels, when we are as pure as they are, filled with their light, they can't tell the difference, and they have no idea that we stole it. And with that in mind, being the pure beings that we are today, having granted and found forgiveness in God and in others, we sing both lines of the Shema aloud. Page 28. Baruch
אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Page 38.
Truth and faith. These are fundamental to our existence. God alone is their source, and we are Israel, a people of God. Our sovereign saves us from tyranny, redeems us from its violence through countless wonders, from its brutality through great feats beyond measure. Together.
We are Israel, a people of God, the giver of life, who would not let our feet give way, the maker of miracles for us against Pharaoh, of signs and portents in the land of Egypt, the one who brought our people Israel from its midst to enduring freedom. Top of page 40.
Witnesses to this heroic might, the people thanked and praised God by name, freely accepting the reign of heaven. Then Moses and Miriam and all Israel sang to you this song of utter joy.
Top of page 43.
When fears multiply and danger threatens, when sickness comes, when death confronts us, it is God's blessing of shalom that sustains us and upholds us, lightening our burden, dispelling our worry, restoring our strength, renewing our hope, reviving us.
Page 45. For on this day of atonement shall be made for you, to purify you from all your wrongs, and pure shall you be in the presence of Adonai. Once again, if you're able, I'll invite you to rise as we face east.
וחיי כל בית ישראל.
Page 53. You are holy, your name is holy, Seekers of holiness praise you day by day. Selah. In the ancient world, Selah was a term that many people don't fully understand, but it actually meant something akin to strike up the band. And it was the way that often at the end of a prayer you would know that the choir would participate. Well, being as we are a congregation of singers, it's become our custom over these high holy days, these past 2 years, to add our voices to this section. Uvechen, a set of prayers that begin with the words, and therefore. We are that band. And so when we hear the word Selah, we add our voices over and over and over again. As I read the translation of these central prayers of the high holy days underneath. Let's hear you. Uvechen. 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 And so in your holiness, give all creation the gift of awe. Turn our fear to reverence. Let us be witnesses of wonder, perceiving all nature as a prayer come alive. We bow to the sovereignty of your strength, the primacy of your power. We yearn for connection with all that lives, doing your will with a wholeness of heart. Awe-inspiring is your creation, all-encompassing your transcendent name. Together? Uvechen, 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 And so in your holiness, give your people the gift of honor. Bless with praise those who praise you. Bless with hope those who seek you. Give your believers a basis for faith, true happiness for the land of Israel, true joy in Jerusalem. May the sparks of David, your servant, soon grow bright enough for us to see a beam of light in the darkness, a promise of perfection. Together. And so in your holiness, give the righteous the gift of a vision bright with joy, a world where evil has no voice and the rule of malevolence fades like wisps of smoke. Good people everywhere will celebrate the stunning sight of arrogance gone from the earth. Selah. Together. Page 58. You and you alone, Adonai, will reign over creation upon Mount Zion, home of your presence, and in Jerusalem, a city set apart by you. As the psalmist believed, Adonai will reign eternally, your God Zion for all generations. Hallelujah. moment for private prayer from page 60 through page 81. And when you're finished, I'll invite you to be seated. moment, we're going to move into our vidui section of our service, into our public confession. When we confess in the plural, with the understanding that although we may not have done every single sin that is on this page, we, in a way, are liable. Because there's a difference between doing the wrong and being responsible for the wrong. And although we may not have done everything on this page, have we done enough to correct a society that allows for each of these sins? Our tradition understands that all of Israel is responsible for one another. And for that very reason, every person in our community, it becomes our sacred obligation to look after them and to help them up if they fall, to help stop them before they sin, to rebuke them when they see that they are doing the wrong thing. And so each of these sins, in a way, become a piece of ours, which is why when we give ourselves a little tap, showing the pain that each of these has caused, we do them to ourselves as well, asking the question, did we do enough? We rise together, page 82.
תבוא לפניך תפילתנו ואל תתעלם מתחינתנו אנחנו עזי פנים וכשי עורף לאמר לפניך אדוני אלוהינו צדיקים אנחנו ולא Of these wrongs, we are guilty. We betray, we steal, we scorn. We act perversely, we are cruel. We scheme, we are violent, we slander. We devise evil, we lie. We ridicule, we disobey, we abuse. We defy, we corrupt, we commit crimes. We are hostile, we are stubborn, we are immoral, not immortal. We kill, we spoil, we go astray, we lead others astray.
Page 86.
שחטאנו לפניך, בזדון ובשגגה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך, בדיבור פה. Please join me. The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, the harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך, באימוץ הלב, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך, בטיפשות פה. The ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and the harm we have caused in your world through careless speech. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך, בכך שובך עזב, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך, ברכילות. The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזלזול הורים ומורים. The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and the harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בווידוי פה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בהונאת רע. The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world by mistreating a friend or neighbor. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחוזק יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך במשא ובמתן. The ways we have wronged you through violence and abuse, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. ועל כולם מלוא הסליחות, סלח לנו מחלנו, כפר לנו. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגלוי ובסתר, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת עול. The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by losing self-control. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגילוי עריות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך במאכל ובמשתה. The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בנשך ומבית. The ways we have wronged you by giving in to our hostile impulses, and the harm we have caused in your world through greed and exploitation. The ways we have wronged you through cynicism and scorn, and harm we have caused in your world through arrogant behavior. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשנאת חינם, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בטומאת שפתיים. The ways we have wronged you by hating without cause, and the harm we have caused in your world through offensive speech. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בלשון הרע, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצרות עין. The ways we have wronged you with a slanderous tongue, and harm we have caused in your world through a selfish or petty spirit. ועלו כולם אלוה slichot lechlanu mechalanu kaperanu.
For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement.
We turn to page 96 and we're seated together.
Let our needs rise up with the darkness, our cries with the rays of the sun. All day our praises before you, songs of joy and bliss till evening comes.
Now you know what to do.
Let's hear you.
Tierra,
Tierra, Tierra,
One more.
Page 99.
Together with me, please. Will you hear my voice, you who are far from me? Will you hear my voice wherever you are? A voice calling aloud, a voice silently weeping, endlessly demanding a blessing. This busy world is vast, its ways are many. Paths meet for a moment, then part forever. We go on searching, but our feet stumble. We cannot find that which we have lost. Perhaps my last day is already drawing near. Drawing close are the tears of parting. I will wait for you till my days flicker out, like Rachel waiting for her beloved.
Page 100.
God of forgiveness, we come before you in need of compassion. At Sinai, you spoke words that guide our lives to this day, but our ancestors lost faith in you, lost hope in their Redeemer. With one voice, they had promised, we will do and obey, and yet, stiff-necked, they broke their word, adoring an idol of gold. How wondrous your compassion in the face of their rebellion, your forgiveness in that moment of human weakness and doubt. We too have broken promises to you. We too worship the work of our own hands. We too make of gold a god, and we too forsake your word. At Sinai, you revealed 13 attributes of mercy. These aspects of your nature, your very essence, we now recall. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon.
And it doesn't happen quickly. This getting used to the impermanence that we're always going to have to keep working on it, always. But even God knows it takes time, and so we slow ourselves, not to be in such a race, in such a rush, to have it all fixed, knowing it's not going to get all fixed.
Page 104.
Our God and God of our fathers, God of our mothers, do not abandon us, leaving us in shame. Do not dissolve the covenant you made with us. Rather, draw us near to your teaching. Show us your ways and teach us how to live. Let us be open to your love, ready to revere your very being. cut away the hardness of our hearts so that we may turn to you with all our heart's devotion, truly repentant. For the sake of your great name, pardon our failures, forgive our moral weakness, as in the holy words of your psalmist, Adonai, as befits your name, forgive my sin, no matter how great.
Page 106. Turn to page 114, and we rise for Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu Shema Koleinu.
Together, Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lifanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu Ve'alul Aleinu V'tabeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and on our families.
Avinu Malkeinu Kalit Dever V'chev V'rav Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu Kali Kol Tsar U'Mastin Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause terror.
Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu Be'sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu Malei Yadeinu Mibirchotecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, let our hands overflow with your blessings.
Avinu Malkeinu Harem Keren Meshitecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, let our eyes behold the dawn of redemption.
Avinu Malkeinu Na'al Teshiveinu Rekam Milfanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we pray, do not turn us away from you with nothing.
Avinu Malkeinu Kabel Berachamim Uvratzon Et Tefilateinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, welcome our prayer with love, accept and embrace it.
Avinu Malkeinu Aseh Imanu Leman Shemecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us as befits your name.
Avinu Malkeinu Aseh Lemanecha Im Lo Lemanenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, act for your sake, if not for ours.
Avinu Malkeinu Ein lanu melech ela ata.
Avinu Malkeinu, you alone are our sovereign.
Avinu Malkeinu pitach sharei shamayim litfilataynu.
Avinu Malkeinu, let the gates of heaven be open to our prayer.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu, Chuz v'rachem aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, hear our voice, treat us with tender compassion.
Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'aneinu, Kein banu masim, Asei manu tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lifanecha. Avinu Malkeinu,
Please be seated. When I was in college, I'm realizing that most of my sermons this high holiday started like that. I began to seriously doubt the existence of God. As strange as it sounds, I was in the middle of leading High Holy Day services at Tufts University Hillel when I looked down at the liturgy that I was reading, and I thought, do I believe any of this? Imagine I'm standing up there reading one of the most iconic images from the High Holy Days, the prayer Unetanet Tokef, which we will hear tomorrow. A prayer that speaks about God judging our fate for next year, deciding who will live and who will die, describing humanity standing behind the angels in heaven, gripped by fear at our unknown fate. And there I was thinking, how could I be saying something that I can't imagine is true? This moment kicked off for me perhaps my life's greatest crisis of faith. And in hindsight, as I'll hopefully show you tonight, I am so glad that I had that experience. Now, a little background. I wanted to be a rabbi since before I could remember. I have an early recollection of sitting there in religious school services in first grade, staring at my rabbi and thinking, I want to do that someday. Soon, where other kids played firemen, I bar mitzvahed my sister's dolls. Naturally, I took all the steps that one needs to move forward on a path toward rabbinic school. I went to Eisner, a Jewish summer camp. I got involved in our regional Nifty chapter, and I chose specifically to attend a college which offered comparative religion as a major and 4 years of college-level Hebrew. But during that High Holy Day season, it seemed that the dream was beginning to crumble. I remember thinking to myself over that fall and winter about the many things that I knew that I could not believe. I would open up my pocket Torah commentary and think to myself, God can't be jealous, or God has no gender, or God has no body, or God can't command us to kill the Canaanites simply because they live in a land that we want. Soon I was ready to postpone my dream of becoming a rabbi until I could resolve the God question. It took until the following summer for me to sit with a rabbi at Eisner Camp and hear from him that it was okay to feel this way. It was during that brief conversation, sitting on the bleachers by the baseball field after my campers were all asleep, that Rabbi Eric Gervis told me a story that I had heard numerous times before, but I hadn't actually internalized. In the Torah, Jacob has been estranged from his brother for 20 years, and tomorrow they will reunite. Scared for what that meeting will bring, he sends his whole family across the Yabbok River, and he's left alone. Soon a strange being comes and begins to wrestle with him. As Jacob begins to win the fight, the being asks him to let him go, since dawn is breaking and he needs to return home. Jacob, knowing that there was something special about his sparring partner, bargains with him. He says, I'll let you go if you bless me first. Turning to Jacob, the being says, quote, your name will no longer be Jacob. Jacob, which means heel, since he was born grabbing onto the heel of his brother and fighting to be born first. But Yisrael, Israel, which means he who wrestles with God. Rabbi Gervis turns to me. The essence of Judaism is asking the exact questions and wrestling with the same doubts that you have been doing. You don't have to believe everything you read. The simple act of questioning doesn't make you an apostate. It's what makes you a Jew. Now that I've been in a rabbinic role for almost a decade, it's funny how many times I've channeled Rabbi Gervis's reassurances to others in my midst. There is no phrase that I heard more from people in our congregation during this first year when we talked about their Judaism than, Rabbi, I don't believe in God. Sometimes it's said by a strident 12-year-old. At other times, by a sheepish patient when I ask to pray with them at their bedside. I was taught by a professor when faced with these statements to ask them to describe the God that they don't believe in. And more often than not, I also don't believe in that God. I have a mentor who often quipped that you should never ask a congregation who believes in God because you don't want to know the answer. It's a laugh line. But it's actually a false dichotomy because we actually haven't defined our terms. There are some here who are true atheists, believing that the phenomena that we experience can only be described by the chemicals that are coursing through our bodies. And if that is you, and you are that atheist, there is a place for you here. There is no theological litmus test, and your voice will always matter in the Jewish conversation. But much of the time, people use the term atheist to explain the fact that their spiritual worldview is too wide to encompass what they read about God in our sacred texts. And if that's your definition, I'm pretty sure I would number myself in that category too. Sadly, because God is so tied to classical Jewish images, which people may or may not agree with, most rabbis actually stay away from talking about God altogether. It's a third rail. There are safer topics: Jewish ethics and values, interpersonal dynamics, family, forgiveness, all of which don't cause a large percentage of congregants to shift uncomfortably in their seats at the mention of a topic that they struggle to relate to. But the idea of God is central to Judaism, and to discount that is to lose an important part of our religion and our heritage. Talking about this problem, my mentor, Rabbi Rachel Timoner, confessed a few years back to her congregation, quote, "Because I know this about so many of you, because I'm trying to help you relate, I find myself avoiding the word God. The prayer says it's good to give thanks to God, Tov lehodot l'Adonai. And I'll say, it's good to give thanks. The prayer says you've loved us with a great love, Adonai our God. And I'll say, you're loved by a great love." I have to admit that sometimes I do the same thing. My problem is that I'm quick to make God into an analogy rather than the focus of a conversation. Last week in our family Rosh Hashanah services, I found myself talking about the idea of chen, which means grace in Hebrew. The fact that God loves you even if you've done nothing to earn that love, which is actually a central theme of the High Holy Days. But because I was nervous that others might not want to talk about God, I jumped ever too quickly to discussing the acts of grace in parenting, something more relatable and, yes, much safer. But that's actually not fair for you, and that's not fair for our rich Jewish heritage. As Rabbi Timoner continued, quote, "We have made God a taboo in God's own house." Tonight, I want to challenge us to look anew at the question of God. Judaism is the record of 3,000 years of God wrestling. And the primary question our ancestors are wrestling with is what they mean when they say the word God. For some, God is the image put forth in the book of Daniel, the old man with the white beard standing above the clouds. This is the classical view of God that appears in paintings and movies. And I imagine it does speak to some of us. And if it does, that's wonderful. But for others, you might want something different. If you're in the later category, you should know that Judaism itself isn't monolithic on its definition of God. Maimonides in the 12th century saw God as fundamentally unchanging. And for this reason, God doesn't hear our prayers, he says, because to do so would be to change God. One moment God doesn't hear us, and the next, God does. Instead, he explains, God is constantly pouring forth blessing like a fountain, and it is our responsibility to refine ourselves so we can become a vessel to catch that blessing. In the 17th century, Jewish philosopher Baruch Spinoza imagined that God and nature are one. For Spinoza, God is the substance that makes up the universe. Every person, every flower, every breath of air is an experience of God. In fact, it is God. Later, this thinking would lead Albert Einstein to proclaim that in a world of science, quote, "There are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other as though everything is a miracle." As time progressed, more and more thinkers expanded the universe of meaning contained within the word God. In the 20th century, Martin Buber taught us that God can be the space that exists between two people when they're having a profound and connected interaction. Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, told us that God can be the source of strength and creativity that pushes all of us and all of creation to reach our truest potential and virtue. Rabbi Harold Kushner, author of When Bad Things Happen to Good People, and no relation to Stephen, saw God's power as fundamentally limited. For him, God doesn't have the power to make us well when we're sick or sick when we're well. Germs do that. Cancer does that. God does, however, have the power to make us brave and to walk beside us as we face the hardest paths of existence. But as much as these thinkers are helpful in expanding the universe of what the word God can mean, I have a confession to make. I've always found problems with trying to understand God from words in a book. Religious philosophy, which is what I've just been quoting, like all philosophy, can be helpful at times in expanding our vocabulary and framing our questions in new ways. But at other times, it just becomes logic puzzles and word games. Case in point, the famous paradox of omnipotence. Can God make a rock so big that God can't lift it? This was all the rage in the Middle Ages. If God can do anything, then God should be able to make that rock. But then isn't God lacking if God can't lift it? Well, intellectually stimulating, these philosophical quandaries do little for my religious sensibilities. For this reason, we God wrestlers have to reframe the questions about God. Instead of looking for answers that make intellectual sense to us and applying it to God, we must experience the world, interrogate moments of connection, transcendence, and holiness, and figure out where God might have dwelt in their midst. After that night of discussion with Rabbi Gervis, I became a student of theology. I attended whatever classes I could that would broaden my understanding of God. I took Jewish books out of the library and I searched them for answers. But as Harold Kushner writes in a different work, which I'll paraphrase, if studying theology is like reading a menu, then religious experience is like eating dinner. And I was still hungry. And then it happened. I hadn't felt any real connection to God in some time. In fact, the real catalyst to my crisis of faith had actually come a few months before that fateful High Holy Days, when during a program about God at camp, a teen turned to me and said, "You don't really believe in God, do you? Tell me, you lead services. Have you actually felt God when you lead?" And I realized I had no answer for her. As a young song leader and prayer leader, I just wasn't proficient enough at my craft to make room for God. My attention was on singing in key, my tempo, my capo, and that's where my mind was during services. It would take until the winter of my senior year, when I was a little better at it, before I could be present enough in services to have an authentic religious experience in prayer. I was leading the prayer Shalom Rav, with a melody many of us know different than tonight, the Kol Beseder melody. And there's a moment right before moving from the second verse into the chorus where there's a silence, a true pause before the final chorus comes in. In that moment when we stop singing, each of us inhaling before moving on, I felt God's presence rush in and fill the room. I'm going to be spending the rest of my life reflecting back on the nature of that presence, using theology and philosophy to explain what I felt that evening. But in that moment, it mattered less what God was than that God was there. Since then, I've realized that many of my own moments of transcendence happen not at services, but somewhere else. Think back to when, in your life, you have felt true moments of awe, or when you have felt an organic and unexplainable connection, or a deep love that seems to defy expectations. Was it on top of a mountain? Were you staring into a face of a child? Were you held up by something during a tragedy? Was it an experience with art or music? You can use a myriad of words to describe those moments. Why be afraid to let yourself include God as part of that description? Surely if God exists, God is expansive enough to include your own definition. I've always loved the Hindu proverb about a blind king who rules a kingdom of blind subjects. He's heard in storybooks about this thing that's called an elephant, and he wants to understand it. And he brings one into the castle, and he asks his blind advisors to line up and to tell him about the nature of an elephant. And after spending some time feeling with their hands, they come back to him with the answer. One says an elephant is thick like a tree trunk. Another says it's smooth and it comes to a point like a strange shell. Another that it's large and floppy like the walls of a tent. And a final one says that it's narrow with a puff on the end, almost like wheat. In truth, an elephant isn't its leg, its tusk, its ear, and its tail. But also, each of these parts of the elephant is an authentic experience of the creature. The problem for these wise men wasn't the elephant per se. It was that their scope was narrow. Every metaphor in our prayer book, every vignette in our Torah, every philosophical treatise, every theological statement is one person or one era's attempt to explain their experience of God, their piece of the elephant. And just because someone once experienced God differently than you and wrote it down in your prayer book, attempting to put words to that ineffable experience using their own cultural references of symbols, that doesn't mean that your own take, your own words, your own metaphors are any less profound. They might have felt that God feeling far away and powerful in their milieu meant that God was king. You might feel the same, but you might use the words universe or cosmos. When we read something with which we don't agree, doubt should not turn us off to it. In fact, doubt itself is an act of faith. For rather than growing indifferent, doubt keeps us engaged in the struggle, reminding us to keep interrogating our assumptions until we settle on something that makes sense to us. Despite being a rabbi, I don't have many answers about God. I can't tell you why bad things happen in the world, though I have some ideas. I can't tell you what happens after you die, though I have some musings. And I can't tell you where God is or what God is or even how to find God, though sometimes I have a feeling. What I can tell you is that I need God. For it is in the pursuit of God that I explore some of the most fundamental questions in life. It is in God that I make way for things far bigger than myself. It is through God that I find a prism to see the holiness around me. This year, I want to ask, what if you allowed yourself to get past what you don't believe in and start exploring what you do? What if you embraced your doubts, but you let go of your cynicism? What if you let God mean life, or love, or hope, or nature? And then you prayed for those things through the language of Judaism. I'm not sure I will ever feel done wrestling, but that's the point. But in the meantime, I'll pray, I'll wonder, I'll hope, I'll marvel, I'll be amazed and surprised, connected and estranged, alienated but embraced. And in the meantime, I know God in whatever form, in whatever way, is smiling down on every single one of those steps. Gemar Chatima Tova.
I think it's fair to say that for many of us, we begin to know God more when we are in service of each other, when we serve one another, when we find joy in being there for each other. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha. Serve God. Do it with gladness. Here we go. We hope that you'll feel glad as we sing this text to you.
עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. בואו בואו לפניו, בואו בואו לפניו, בואו לפניו ברננה. בואו בואו לפניו, בואו בואו לפניו, בואו לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. בואו 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 לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. בואו 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 לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. בואו בואו לפניו, בואו בואו לפניו, בואו לפניו ברננה. בואו בואו לפניו, בואו בואו לפניו, בואו לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. בואו 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 לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם, עבדו את השם בשמחה. בואו 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 לפניו ברננה.
And so we're going to move into the concluding section of our service as we rise together for Aleinu, and we turn to page 116.
עלינו לשבח לדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם בגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
We're seated together, page 119. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. pause at the conclusion of our service to think of those who we have loved and who we have lost. And so together we turn to page 122. And as I call each category of mourning, if it applies to you, I'll invite you to rise and share the name of your loved one for whom you are remembering. If you are in Shiva the first 7 days since losing a loved one, I'll invite you to rise. If you are in Shloshim the first 30 days since losing a loved one, I'll invite you to rise. If you are in Shana, if it's within 12 months since losing a loved one, I'll invite you to rise and share their name. And if this week is a yard site, the anniversary of a loved one's death, I'll invite you to rise. In support of those standing, if you're able, I'll invite you to rise. As again, we turn to page 122 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad yivrach yirutzeh v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayechon u'v'yomachon u'v'chayed l'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala u'v'yizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah m'varach le'olam olamei amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalar v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah b'reichu, le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiram b'yama v'imru amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Please be seated. So before we move into our concluding song, which is going to be on page 127, just a few quick announcements for tomorrow and for the rest of our High Holy Day season. So tomorrow morning, in addition to the many services that are happening, 2 seatings of our Biyachad family service, our teen service, our Tot service, which is at 2 o'clock, our main service will continue right back here at 10 a.m. Then text study with Rick Abrams at 2 p.m., Yisker at 3 p.m., and Mincha Ne'ilah starting at 4 p.m. And I want to give us a heads up that Mincha is going to look a little bit different than it has in the past. It's customary to read Leviticus chapter 18 in the afternoon, but most Reform and conservative synagogues across the country change that reading to Leviticus chapter 19, which is called the Holiness Code. Love your neighbor as yourself and the giving of charity. The reason we're going to return back to it is for the exact reason that many skip it, which is that it includes the line, if one man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, it's an abomination. And so rather than pretend it doesn't exist in our tradition, we're going to have a panel of members who are part of the LGBTQ community who will respond to that line. And together we'll have a communal text study that doesn't hide that line, but rather treats it fully. And so that's going to be tomorrow at 4 p.m. And then our High Holy Days continue past Yom Kippur. Sunday, October 13th, is actually our kickoff to Sukkot. And so in addition to dwelling in the sukkah, there's two additions to that night, which are really exciting. The first is actually consecration this year for our newest students is not going to be on Simchat Torah. It's going to be there, and I'll explain why it's not on Simchat Torah in a second. So it's going to be that night at 5 p.m. In addition to that, we have a few alumni, students or people in their 20s who are kind of coming back to our congregation who grew up here, who are going to provide the music in the sukkah for the night. And so it's really exciting. Mark your calendars, October 13th at 5 p.m. Then we have our normal Sukkot services, Monday the 14th at 10 a.m., Monday the 21st at 8:30 a.m., which is Shmini Atzeret and our Yizkor morning service. And then Monday, October 21st at 7 p.m., we're going to do a new way of celebrating Simchat Torah. Rather than come here and have consecration and dance with the Torahs, all the local Montclair and wider area synagogues are coming to Church Street. We have a permit to close down Church Street, and we're going to turn Church Street into the Upper West Side. We're going to dance with the Torahs publicly, lots of us, hopefully hundreds of us. And so I really want to encourage you to come. That is Monday, October 21st at 7 p.m. We've got a lot going on. Kenny mentioned much of it. I want to give one extra plug for our Israel trip. It's August 22nd to September 1st. You'll see a banner right outside. There is that pre-meeting, which you don't need to come to, but if you want to learn more about the trip, on October 20th at 1 p.m. And so, with this, I want to wish everyone a Gamar Chatzima Tova, if we're seeing you at other services or not. And we will conclude with the singing on page 127.
Shivenu Adonai Elecha Vena Shuva Vena Shuva Yameinu
Gamar Tov.